Welcome to the Wheats on Your Mind podcast. My name is Aaron Harries. Wheats on Your Mind is brought to you by the Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. In this episode, we're going to take a look back and review some of the major wheat stories and events of 2024 and maybe take a look forward to the upcoming year. Our guest is the CEO of Kansas Wheat, Justin Gilpin. Justin, there is never a boring wheat year, or at least I've never seen one in my career. This one seems like it was different than all the others. Let's start by taking a look back at the crop, how it played out.
Well, it's good to be back on the podcast with you, Aaron. Every year certainly is different. 2024 is probably going to be one of those, I think, one that you and I who've been in this for a while will remember this year, not just because of the crop, but of all the other major events that are happening around wheat and significant things that within industry and politics just made for a very, very interesting year. And from a wheat perspective, right, with our crop, how we were able to come out of pretty poor conditions, being in year 3 or year 4 of drought challenging conditions for our growers, having that crop kind of finish strong and be able to get above the 300 million total production for the state of Kansas, coming off of our lowest production since 1966 at 200 million in 2023. So it was good to rebound in that production and good to get back to somewhat of a normal crop. That's a very marketable crop with good balanced protein throughout, and it sets the stage for what we're going to be having for marketing that crop going into this winter and the first half of next year. It looks to be in a good shape.
It was so dry so late into the spring, and then the rain kicked in, and you and I just went on global crop quality tours, you in Asia and me in South America, where we talk about the quality of the hard red winter wheat crop. It's that rare combination of pretty good test weights and high protein, and I think it's because of that late rain that came on.
I think you and I both are in that mindset of just doing multiple crop quality seminars, so I'm having to shift gears a little bit, going from thinking about what the production was like to now we're really focused on how we're trying to market and present the quality and the value this crop can present to our important overseas customers and our domestic buyers. But certainly a balanced crop. The state of Kansas averaged 12.4 protein this year, but we had a good mix of low protein and some higher protein, and of course carryover stocks of high protein for those buyers that want it, that hopefully can help with our hard red winter wheat exports that got off to a good start here in 2024. Kind of demand is weakening a little bit as we get into the end of the calendar year, but there's some prospects to peak back up, and certainly going to be a rebound in improved exports over 2023.
And our market year runs from June 1 to May 31st.
For the wheat marketing years, yep.
And we could only go up from the last marketing year.
That's for sure.
We just didn't have the bushels, and I was happy to say on the tour this year that we have a lot of bushels available, good quality bushels, and at a pretty good value for the buyer.
Well, and certainly want that buyer to, it's a very competitive global market space right now, and wheat is on the front and center of that when buyers are looking at other options, and whether it's wheat out of the Black Sea or the Southern Hemisphere crop that's coming on right now. And so we've got to do our best to position the U.S. crop and work with our U.S. wheat exporters to try to help them be put in a position to create that demand and get bushels going off our coast, because for our markets and for our farmers, that's an important piece of the marketing structure, that we are having those exports. And I do think those U.S. Wheat Associates crop quality seminars serve as a very important tool, and the amount of buyers that actually are in those meetings where you have face-to-face and be able to talk about each year's crop being a little bit different, but then the specific intrinsic quality characteristics of the crop, of how it's going to perform, not just from a milling, but then from a flour and dough and baking and end-use prospect, and that value for that farmer or for that end-use customer is what we need to do to try to help differentiate U.S. wheat in that competitive market space. So hopefully we'll continue to see those exports kind of remain improved over last year, and then try to build back and try to regain some of that market share that we did lose just because of those difficult production years where we were out of the market.
The buyer does have a lot of options these days. The global market isn't like it was 20 or 30 years ago. It seemed a lot more cut and dry. The size of the Kansas crop used to mean a lot more to world markets, but that's not the case anymore. Let's look at a couple of factors that are affecting the movement of wheat right now. Russia. It's got to be one of them, right?
Well, that's been the biggest shift that's happened over the last decade. Is very very intentional with what they have done. And, we've talked about that before on this podcast, and now they had a very strategic intent of trying to displace North America, U.S., and Canada as the world's largest wheat exporters to position themselves where they were leaders and not just exporters of energy, but also food, for very much a political decision on their part to try to have leverage on food import dependent countries and populations. And so how they've done that with subsidizing, inputs and rail structure and positioning themselves to be able to undercut price of what cost of production and prices being sold out of North America has been very, very intentional. And I think it's really caused a lot of us internally to think about the importance of wheat and where it is for not just national food security, but global food security, and trying to make sure that free market systems are available to buyers around the world, and how we need to have the right policies in place going forward. I do believe that we're getting that discussion elevated at the right levels where we can start to think of ways to try to address those concerns.
Do they have quotas in place right now?
Well, right now, Russia's been very aggressive, selling wheat out of the Black Sea, exporting around 4 to 5 million metric tons a month. I think most of the trade, or most people, anticipate to see some type of government intervention, which is, again, what they're known for, and doing some type of quota structure where that might be close to around 12 million metric tons potentially is some of the talk that's being reported out there over that 6-month period. So that'd be closer to around 2 to 3 million metric tons. So almost half of what they've been doing on a monthly basis, which would potentially turn buyers to other sources where U.S. wheat hopefully would get in that mix and potentially have an opportunity to make up for what they're going to be backing out of the market.
Also got a very large soybean crop in the U.S. this year. How does that affect things?
Big soybean market in the world, right? So it's certainly kind of, from a supply standpoint, one of the things the market's digesting, not just the United States, but then South America with the large supply of soybeans, trying to see where the demand's going to be, where's China going to be for that soybean and corn exports. It's definitely having an impact also on all of our major principal crops and prices right now.
Well, we have had an election since you and I talked last on this podcast. A little big deal there. So President Trump will be coming into office in January. I know one of the questions I got when I was in South America is tariffs. What can we look forward to in that policy? So what are your hopes and concerns with Trump and trade?
Well, I think when you look back at 2024, right, I mean, that's what's one of the things that's going to make this a very memorable year. Trump's re-election back as president, and kind of the potential kind of reversing of some of the policies that we've had in place the last 4 years. And, I think everybody has an idea kind of what Trump's policies and intentions are going to be from a broader scale. Certainly the tariffs, and maybe focusing a little bit more on protection of, U.S. agriculture, U.S. industries, and what that might mean in the global trade realm. The recent announcement of the Secretary of Agriculture kind of leans towards support of those policies. And so, as we're recording this today, right, nothing's been put into place, but I do believe that we're having gravitating towards that way, and similar to what we saw in his first term. Like when I was asked questions about that, I think the expectation is we know what he's going to try to position the United States, and he's going to implement those strategies, maybe even in a little bit bolder way, and surrounded himself by folks that are loyal to him and supportive of those policies, and try to make the most out of this term. I think is probably what you can expect. The world buyer may be, and the markets may be, trying to position themselves for tariffs with China specifically, and see how we can navigate those compared to how we did the last time. But now we're also hearing a lot of talk about Mexico, whereas that's almost the opposite of what we saw in his first term, where we were able to get the USMCA agreement into place. And of course, Mexico is something we got to keep a very close eye on, as they are the largest buyer of wheat out of the United States from our export customers. And so any potential impact on trade restrictions or tariffs that might impact ag exports into Mexico is something that we'll be definitely keeping a pretty close eye on. But I don't know what you heard, but I think most of the meetings that I was at through South Asia, I think people overseas obviously watch the U.S. elections very closely. And with everything that's happening geopolitically in the world right now, I think the one thing you got from hearing those people asking those questions is they were looking for strength out of the United States and foreign policy, and I was maybe I was even a little bit surprised, but I would say that it felt like the majority of people in those meetings that we met with were probably more excited about seeing Trump get a chance to be back in office and looking forward to the United States trying to be stronger in foreign policy in the world stage.
Yeah, I got that sense from people in South America, just actually optimistic about trade, about Trump stabilizing things a little bit, because there are some countries in South America that aren't quite as stable as you might like them. I think for the most part in South America, we have free trade agreements with Colombia and Chile and Peru, so tariffs didn't seem to be as big a concern with them. I think one thing we can't forget is the first Trump administration, his policies made the value of the dollar very high, and that can have a big impact on exports.
No, it certainly can, especially with elevated prices and competitive marketplace where the dollar is compared to overseas and currencies. Does definitely have an impact on those FOB prices out of the U.S. that go into the calculation of those overseas buyers.
All right. Well, in 2024, it seems like we're reaching a peak maybe with regenerative ag, sustainable ag, carbon markets. And so there's been a lot of investment by the wheat industry in sustainable ag, regenerative ag. Some benefit to farmers, obviously. But I think the question remains, well, with the Trump administration, what does the future hold for those? What's your crystal ball say for regenerative ag and carbon programs in the Trump administration?
Well, I don't know if any of us really know, or if he even really knows, but I think it's safe to assume a lot of the investments that have been made in that regenerative ag sustainability sector and the programs being put in place may change a little bit, but from what we're hearing, there's still a major drive and initiative from private companies in wanting to move in that direction and looking at programs that farmers then can benefit in and hopefully can capitalize on, and maybe being rewarded for practices that they've already been implementing that have been beneficial for the soil health and increased productivity on their farms. And we've engaged in that. I think our WheatRx program over the last year has become known throughout the state, and really good work that's coming out of Kansas State University and providing information for farmers. But then also just 2024, just this fall, we unveiled the Beyond the Value of Grain for Wheat and the importance in cropping systems. I think that's going to be in a 7-part series where we're beginning to roll that out to recognize the environmental benefits that wheat plays in those cropping systems and the importance of cropping rotations. I really think that that's going to resound well with our industry partners, but then also really being able to communicate loudly what our farmers already know, that value, that stubble soil erosion, being able to catch snow with wheat stubble and help increase building soil moisture profiles and breaking pest cycles, and the importance that role wheat plays in cropping systems, and putting that on a little bit more under the spotlight and communicating that to our partners. And I think that's 2024 that I'm excited to be able to roll that out as well.
Yeah, folks listening to this podcast, there's a episode about wheat, Beyond the Value of the Grain, a few podcasts earlier, so make sure to check that out. Well, regarding the technology of wheat, it's been a huge year in 2024. We can talk about GMO wheat, and then just recently here, Corteva made an announcement about hybrid wheat. Let's start with GMO first. For a long time, we've been talking about GMO wheat technology. When is that going to be available in wheat? And it seems like that era is upon us, on the globe at least, if not so in the United States. Right.
So Bioceres, the Argentina company that's been working with HB4 trait for that drought tolerance trait in wheat, it's been out there for several years. The trait's been around for over a decade. It's from sunflower that they've been able to incorporate into soybeans and then into wheat that helps get response to help yield stability in drought stress situations. But from 2024 standpoint for the United States, what marks it as significant was for the first time ever, the United States has deregulated a GM wheat trait. And you and I have been around this for a long time talking about GM wheat and seeing that availability potentially starting to actually move within the U.S. wheat industry, and potential incorporating adoption of GM technology into wheat is, a pretty significant milestone in 2024. And hybrid wheat is something that's been worked on by a lot of companies over the last several decades. But Corteva's recent announcement of hybrid hard red winter wheat being available in 2027 and some technology advancements that they've been able to make in that seed production. So I think those are two very exciting announcements for the adoption of technology in wheat, and which is what we really need to work on is our production efficiency and how we can compete in making wheat a profitable crop by having those adoption of technologies. As I think 2024 is something that we'll look back on as being pretty significant in those movements, and be able to move in that direction of increased technologies in wheat. It's pretty exciting.
In recent news, APHIS has proposed some new regulations regarding gene editing that are very positive. I won't get into the details on that, but some regulations or deregulations that would make the editing of wheat a little bit more streamlined. So that's just another layer. It's going to be an exciting next 5 to 10 years in wheat seed technology. Well, let's wrap up the discussion on one of my favorite stories of the year is, we've got a new wheat variety, KS Bill Snyder, and that's been a fun thing for you and I and the staff and the board to get to interact with the legendary K-State football coach and have a wheat variety named after him. And what I'm excited about is it seems to be a really good wheat variety.
Well, it is exciting, and I know when we did the event where we had head coach Bill Snyder at the event back in March, being able to unveil the announcement of that K-State variety being named KS Bill Snyder was a really nice event and something that you and I will remember for a long time. It's great to be able to see. We all know that intersection of our land-grant university here at Kansas State has with its serving ag stakeholders with the mission of the land-grant university. But we all are so aware of and passionate about also that the athletics portion that the university brings through athletic programs, and to see that interaction, that cross-section between athletics and agriculture, and being highlighted by being able to have that name KS Bill Snyder intertwined is going to really resonate with a lot of people, and I know it was really special. Kansas State had a really significant year this year with the groundbreaking of the Global Grain and Food Innovation Center this year. It's going to be a new home for the Department of Grain Science and a major fundraising initiative to enhance the capabilities here at within the College of Ag, delivering not just student experience, but then also enhancing the capabilities of potential research and investments back into the industry, and Kansas State's role in that under the leadership of President Linton. Really, really exciting. I do need to mention the Dean, Ernie Minton, and his role in leadership that he's been able to provide and put into place for this project is going to make 2024 one of those really significant years from that investment standpoint and increasing the capacity at Kansas State University, and that being able to deliver that land grant mission to important stakeholders like the wheat farmers in the state of Kansas.
And every morning on my way to work, I drive by the construction project for the new Agronomy Innovation Center here on the North Agronomy Farm. So a lot of exciting things going on. Well, as we record this, we've just come off of a lot of nice rain across the state in November, so I don't think we could ask for a much better start to the 2025 crop.
Well, we're very thankful, right? Especially how things were started off and having one of the driest Octobers, Septembers for planting season. We had a very rapid fall harvest, got corn and soybeans moving pretty fast. It did not provide that good moisture then for the wheat crop to across the state to be able to get up and emerge and like we wanted to. Seeing that pattern change and going from one of the driest Octobers on record to potentially one of the wettest Novembers on record does set the stage for the wheat crop being in much better condition going into winter. Obviously, rains in November will not make the wheat crop, but certainly will allow us to feel a little bit better with this crop going into dormancy and its potential once we get into next spring.
A lot of optimism heading into 2025. Next time you and I visit, we'll have a few months behind us and we'll see how things are going. Thanks for joining us.
Always great to be with you, and congrats on how well this podcast is being received and all the good information and guests that you've been able to put together. And I think that also is a highlight of 2024 is how well your Wheats on Your Mind podcast has been going. So congrats to you, Aaron.
Thank you, Justin. My thanks to Justin Gilpin for joining me on this episode of the podcast. Remember, if you have a follow-up question you'd like to ask or have a future topic for one of our podcasts, please email us at kswheat@kswheat.com. I'm Aaron Harries. Thanks for listening.